All right, so our next panel for today is titled Through the Lens of Technology, Dispelling the Myths. Your moderator is Daniela Roos, director of the MIT CSAIL program, and the Andrew and Erna Viterbi professor of MIT ECS. Her panelists are Fred Goff, the CEO of JobCase, Scott Prevost, the vice president of engineering at Sensei Adobe, and Julie Shaw, associate professor, the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT, and lead interactive robotics group at MIT CSAIL. Please help me welcome them.
So hello again. I'm really delighted to continue the conversation with my eminent colleagues. And to get started, I would like to ask each of the panelists, where do you see technology today in your specific industry, in your specific domain? Can you tell us something positive about how technology is supporting everything? And maybe I will start with you, Fred, because we will go from very practical to much more theoretical.
So I run a social media site dedicated to empowering workers. So we focus on the 80% of folks that are kind of powering this nation. It's called JobCase. So, and we have been AI powered. We've been affiliated of CSAIL since we started. And so it's an interesting perspective I bring when I have the pleasure of coming here, because I'm amplifying the voice of workers and we're serving them. So when you say in my industry, I could think of that as social media. I could think of that as human capital, in particular talent acquisition. But through that platform, we have an insight to workers in all industries in the U.S. And I think that it's an exciting point. I think that it's really cool to see what's going on. Our basic mission and message on the individual side is that all of these changes, which have tremendous anxiety about the future, tremendous uncertainty, if you lean into them, can be incredibly empowering, right? The same technology that might have your job move because it's gone beyond tasks to jobs also makes education free and available. And so we try to give those tools, and I think that there is excitement about that. I don't think that it's as nervous about the robots are coming to kill us out there in the population as we think. I also see signs that institutional powers are understanding the other part of our message, that you have to put people first. And I think MIT and Daniela with CSAIL and Eric with what he's doing with the number of initiatives here and the task force are kind of leading the way in that. So you say what we see, it's really cool to see the actual technology move forward. It's neat to see how there's ability of many companies to harness things like TensorFlow as we watch the really exciting developments of companies like Databricks and how they make that available to harness ML in order to power all sorts of organizations, including those throughout the country that don't have the luxury of hiring MIT computer scientists. So that democratization of access to ML to power businesses is really exciting. And there's a whole lot to talk about the technology of that, which my colleagues probably are better suited to talk to than I. What I see that's exciting is there's an opportunity to harness this for a real empowerment of people, instead of to harness it to displace and cause dislocations and problems. And I think that the mood is open to that right now. And so that's what I've seen in the last year. I think that the message has come out, and I think that's the opportunity in the moment we're in.
So this is really great, Fred, because you painted a very nice picture of where we are today. And so, Scott, I want to ask you about tomorrow, because you run an operation that is really focused on making the tools of tomorrow.
Right.
What do you see happening?
Well, at Adobe, there's three core parts of our business. There's the Creative Cloud, the Document Cloud, and the Experience Cloud. And we serve creative professionals, knowledge workers, and particularly marketers on the Experience Cloud side. And what we're seeing is that AI, and Sensei is our sort of umbrella term for AI and machine learning at Adobe that gets deployed throughout our products. And what we're finding is that it's actually empowering the workers, as you say. It's really amplifying the creative professional's abilities and the marketer's abilities to get more done and working sort of at a higher level. And it's helping to automate and make more efficient some of the more mundane production kinds of tasks that people have been doing, but that they don't necessarily enjoy doing. We actually commissioned a study of creative professionals, a qualitative study, and we found that 74% of them said that they spent 50% of their time doing repetitive, non-creative tasks that they don't particularly enjoy doing.
And who wants to do that,
And
right?
who wants to do that, right? And so Adobe Sensei is actually giving them the ability to work at the level that they want to work on the creative tasks, on the, providing that human creative spark. That, deep learning is great. It does very discrete tasks very well. But we don't have general AI yet. And until we have that, there's absolutely lots of room for the creative professional and the marketer to really amplify their abilities. And so, we think this is just a super important path. As we move forward, I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of reinvent everything that we do at Adobe. We like to think of it as an AI-first world that's coming. And so instead of just infusing our products with AI-driven features, the products will become AI. So we're looking at things like Creative Assistant or a marketing assistant that can actually help you work through entire workflows and do everything from be your muse, inspire you, teach you, mentor you, and also, in some sense, help you with production and make your job kind of more efficient.
I've always thought of the machine learning systems that work in the background for us as our assistants, as our interns, running around and doing tasks for us. I love the idea of having a muse running in the background. So I think it's really a wonderful vision for what can happen.
I think one of the other really exciting things is that it enables so much more in terms of output. One of the problems that we face on the marketing side is that we've moved from a world where a marketer had a handful of segments that they were catering to hyper-personalized marketing. Where you could literally market individually to all of your customers. And in order to do that, the demands on content creation are just exploding by orders of magnitude.
It's true. Our appetite for customization is practically limitless.
And so by enabling the creatives and the marketers to be working at this higher level and the AI and machine learning during the production to produce all of this content, it's really kind of the symbiotic relationship.
That's amazing.
May I ask him a question?
Quick one.
Well, there's something you said that caught my attention. You said until we have general AI, creatives have a place in the market, and et cetera.
Well,
that seemed to have an implication. There's something different on the other side of general AI. So do you think that? And if so, how far until we get it?
I think we're not sure. And I think the advances in deep learning have been great, but they haven't moved us along on general AI. And I think people lose that in the hype. So these sort of higher order cognitive skills are just not quite there yet.
All right, thanks.
Well, so we heard from Fred about today. We heard from Scott about tomorrow. Julie, tell us about the day after tomorrow.
The day after tomorrow,
You
yes.
are running a very creative research lab at CSAIL at MIT. You are working on future human-machine collaborations. What is coming?
Yeah, and so to amplify, your point, I'm an AI researcher and a roboticist, and my team and I work on reverse engineering the human mind to develop robots that are better teammates, machines that are better teammates, and to be intentional about how we develop computing that enhances rather than replaces human capability. And so, when we think about teamwork in human teams, we have different preferences on work we prefer to do, but we also have inherently different capabilities, and that's the same with humans and AI. And so the way I think about this is, our innate, special human capability is to structure an unstructured problem. And once we've structured a problem, a machine can crush that. The question is how we develop AI that allows a human to drive that creative and innovative process that actually underlies nearly every facet of human work. And so my lab works on developing AI models to infer what people are thinking, models of how they do their work, to be able to sort of fit in, provide the informational needs, or we deploy robots in factories, so to provide physical materials, and sort of integrate into our human society and human teams as easily and naturally as we train a person to integrate.
So can we really reverse engineer the human mind? That actually takes me to my second set of questions. What do you see as the biggest misconception about AI today? So let's start with you, Julie.
Yes. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we have data on how we do some specific task in a job, and that is perfected at some level that we can automate, and then we're kind of set. And for me, I spent a lot of time on the shop floor in factories, and we were deploying a robot actually out of BMW, and doing our own thing. And I noticed off on the side of the line, there were associates practicing building up a car. And they were sort of looking at the pieces and talking to each other, and I asked, what are those folks over there doing? And they said, oh, well, they're working out the build process for our new model. And you dig deeper, and in factories there is a well-characterized productivity curve that's driven by human innovation. When you talk about a lights-out factory, we've heard people say a lights-out factory is a factory in which there's no improvement, there's no innovation, because it's line workers that drive that process. And so, this idea that you can sort of circumscribe the work, give a system data, train it, and then that's it, I think is a fundamental misunderstanding of the domain expertise and value that we bring to much of the work that we do.
So no lights out factories yet.
Well, I don't. You can have various discussions on it from many different perspectives, but the AI systems we have, we don't know how to construct a line a priori, set it up in the most optimal way. We require sort of being embedded in the process and innovating through it. And so robotics and AI that supports the human input to climb that productivity curve is the technology we really need to be driving for.
I also, like you were telling us earlier, I think it's important for us to aim to get humans and machines to understand each other better, but we are so far from having machines capable of understanding what a human might be doing next, right?
Yeah, and the flip side is true too. We are so far from giving a human the understanding of what the system is doing to be able to fit those two things together. Even Teslas on our roads. There's a renowned researcher in human factors that studies, aviation accidents, fundamental deficiencies in pilot interaction with cockpit automation. And she did a study of her own Tesla, a self-study, to understand, when that system updates overnight, what are you told about how that system's behavior changes? And actually, does it matter? And we know from aviation that that's actually the root of many accidents and incidents. And she found over 6 months of 5 updates, she cataloged, about a dozen significant deficiencies in her understanding of the behavior of her car. And so, it's a two-way street. The systems need to understand us to be effective teammates in some way, and we need to support the human, us, in building our robust mental models of how these systems are behaving if we're going to, work with them in an integrated fashion safely.
Scott, what do you see as the greatest misconception about AI?
I think, it goes back to what I was saying in my first answer. there's this maybe fear that those jobs for creatives and marketers will go away, but in fact, we think, their jobs are going to shift. The creative will become more like an art director instead of doing the fine-grained production. And so, I think what will happen is there's going to be more collaboration between machines and people, and sort of more emphasis on some of those softer skills around creative problem solving and really, being innovative and collaborating well. So, we think, again, it's going to kind of shift to kind of amplify some of the abilities. And to your point about can we understand what people are going to do next, I think, one sort of data resource that we have at Adobe that I think is very powerful is not just the end product of what creatives are building, right? But we know all the steps along the way. And so, it's not just that we're trying to do deep learning on final images. We understand all of the different transforms that are happening along the way, and can even start to predict what tool are you going to use next. What are you actually trying to accomplish at a higher level? And so, getting the people and the machines sort of attuned to this changing world is really, I think, going to be a major focus for us.
So let me dig a little bit into what you said. So do you see machines and technology empowering creative people to do more? Or do you see the machines empowering more people to be creative?
Both. Both, absolutely. It's enabling the creative professionals to do much more. It used to be that you'd have the resources to work up maybe 3 ideas for a client. But if the AI can do a lot of the production work, maybe you can do 10 or 100, right? Which means that you can actually explore some of the further out ideas, the most creative ideas. So in a sense, we're enabling the creative professionals to be more creative. And then, of course, it's also lowering the bar for everyday people who aren't creative professionals like myself to be able to create really compelling output.
But I would argue with you that when you say you're not creative, in fact, I often hear from people, well, you're an engineer, you're not really creative. Well, but there is so much creativity that goes into engineering and everything.
I didn't mean that I'm not creative. I'm not creative I'm not an artist. I'm not a visual artist.
But there is a lot of creativity behind the engineering systems that we build and the capabilities we imagine. And Star Wars cannot be done by artists and drawers alone.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who got in trouble.
So what about on your side, Fred? I'm really concerned about the psychology of the people who really fear technology and do not see technology as a vector for positive change in everyone's lives. I would really love to see everyone find ways to use or see the ways in which technology can help make their lives better. What do you see as the biggest misconception on the people side?
Well, that's a few things. I'll get into a tactical thing, but first, broadly speaking, and you've heard me say this before, don't worry about the workers of the country, because this is just y'all catching up. This is people realizing that, holy crap, MBAs and paralegals can get displaced by technology. What? We have to get conferences about this. If you live in Detroit or Toledo, where I hail from, technology has been displacing jobs for the last half century. So I don't think that most people in this country have the increased anxiety that the coasts do about AI, because they've been living this. That's why wage stagnation is there. That's why we have underemployment where we do. And so I think we're used to technology, and there's a lot of it that they embrace. And quite frankly, there's new tools like platforms, like Jobcase, or plenty of others that are helping make the knowledge grasp and put things on the radar and make things accessible that previously felt inaccessible. Like we were talking before, like a small company in Toledo can now harness output from TensorFlow because there's an intermediary company showing them how to do it. So I think that's okay. I think the misconceptions, there's 3 huge ones that we talk about here, and then there's a tactical one that might be a little different. The big ones we kind of know, so I'll go fast. I'm guessing this audience kind of thinks about future work a little bit. It's tasks, not jobs. It's not going to replace everything. The great work that Professor Brynjolfsson and others have done to focus on that. I think that's a huge one. I think it's machines and humans, not machines or humans. I think that's another big misconception. And maybe I'm going to have a Rick Perry moment and forget number 3 as I go here. But where we're focused on the misconception that I deal with day to day has to do with thinking that humans have structured the problem correctly when they harness ML or AI. I think that differentiation is lost in the zeitgeist now of what the difference is, to get the right answer. And we deal with this every day in human capital landscape and talent acquisition. There are increasing numbers of companies that love to say they're AI-based because their funding numbers go up, and start to talk about how they're going to bring efficiency into the hiring process. And we know the obvious failure modes that have happened with regard to having your prior and your data sets be biased towards gender because that's who you used to hire and do this, and we talk about that. But that's just the ones that we talk about. When I was in a previous life, I had the fun of running a trading desk. And if we took just a kick-butt trader from Goldman Sachs and brought him over onto our desk, I knew that that person was not going to make money for the first couple months. And the reason was because people are really hard-pressed to understand all of the inputs that impact the decision. You can say explicitly these things, but you don't process that the guy at the end of the desk is always wrong on a Friday when payrolls come out, and that was part of your input. You don't process all that. And so when we are processing the data that comes in, which already isn't necessarily accurate in human capital, I don't think the problems are structured right. And we have computers in many companies starting to make decisions on who to hire without the right attributes and the right outcomes and the right feedback. And so when I think about the misconceptions in the tactical level of mine, it's the danger that ML and AI is this really cool, magical thing. And it is a really cool thing, but it's not magical. And if you use the wrong tool for the wrong problem, you're not going to get the right result. And I don't think that's being processed yet, and it's too bad.
Should we create performance tests for the tools we use? Like what I have in mind is we make our kids take driving tests before they can drive a car. What do you think about testing the actual machines before they're allowed to perform?
I'm not sure if I'm processing your question right. I think tests are done all the time. I guess the question is, are we testing for the right outcomes?
Exactly. So should we figure out what are the attributes? Because we know that today's technologies fall short on interpretability, explainability, data provenance, fairness. We can list a laundry of attributes.
Yeah, I think that's, of course, I would agree with that, Danielle. I think that's a really good suggestion. I think the specific problem I'm thinking of as I sit here is we tend to look in the human capital landscape and talent acquisition landscape with all the good work going on as, is this person right for this job in this company? That's not the way the world works. Is this person right for the group they're going to work with? And are we putting all the attributes in about where they're going to land on day one and how much support they have? And is it the fact that this happens to be a back-to-work mom and these are all 19-year-olds? And I'm not saying they couldn't blend together, but I'm saying if you don't take that into account, you have a cultural misfit that then has a retention problem. And by the way, are we just solving for are they going to get the job on day one? Or are we solving for they're going to be retained 6 months or 2 years later so you don't lose all the training and money? So I think it's really good to test, but to frame the problem properly, there's the wrong attributes, right? There's the wrong outcome. Let's not just test that, oh, we have the right person for the job and we're not biased, but are they going to succeed in that job and are we placing them in the right place is really what good managers and human resources and talent acquisition do all the day. And so when you come in with a new product as a vendor and say, I'm going to make your job easier, I'm going to take this away, a person on the other side might even think, oh, that's great, you're going to get this solved, without understanding that there are implicit attributes that they're bringing to the table, that they know that the facility in Hebron, Kentucky has a tough commute, and this person was just complaining about a commute, so that's not going to be a good fit, and they didn't remember to put that into the model. And so I love it, but I'm afraid we might be solving for the wrong problems. Got it.
But that's an interesting topic for the researchers to think about. And so I've been thinking about the performance attributes that have a human impact. And what you're saying is that it's important to also consider how the machines will support the social context. So thinking about collaboration attributes is very important. And thinking about these kinds of things, I wonder if Scott and Julie could weigh in on some new ideas, new advancements that maybe only you know about, that you could share with us so we know what's coming around the corner. That would be helpful.
Yeah, so building on your point, when we make decisions, when we're trained up to do these jobs, we bring so much knowledge, so much background experience that is very difficult for us to codify, to even, in many cases, explicitly, describe. In fact, there's studies of firefighters and others, that do these incredibly challenging jobs of figuring out, the deployment of their team, and how they do that is kind of matching to prior experience and sort of fixing up the new strategy for the changes in the new situation. And when you ask them to describe their decision-making process, you break their ability to do the job. It's fascinating. So even sometimes, trying to explicitly explain your decision-making is problematic. It undermines a person's ability to then make those same decisions. And we think about this a lot. And in recent work in our lab, we've been really focused on how it is you can elicit from a domain expert these sort of implicit preferences, considerations, priorities. And you have the set of techniques you can do to infer latent factors that are influencing decisions. But the challenge with those techniques is that you have no guarantee that the way the system kind of clusters or extracts these latent states maps to anything that resembles a human's mental model of their underlying decision process. And it often doesn't. And you can think about it in clustering data. Many of us kind of have clustered data before. There's many different ways to cluster data for the same sort of goodness of clustering metric. But only one of those clusters, clustering, patterns corresponds to our understanding of the world. In this situation, we do this. In that situation, we do that. And so we have a line of very recent work from the lab, pioneered by Vaibhav Anholkar, who's about to start as faculty at Rice University, looking at how domain experts can guide a machine's inference process. So how you can identify, well, I can't tell you exactly what's affecting my decision-making in this context, but in this situation, I'd make a different decision than in that situation. And you anchor and guide the system's ability to understand and extract latent spaces that align with the human's mental model. And I think that the challenges you're bringing up actually drive for us fundamentally new questions and problem formulations in machine learning, and it's through this dialogue that we can develop tools that are really, really ultimately empowering for us.
But aren't you, Scott, so I think that's great. What I hear, and see if this is what I should hear from you guys, it sounds like it rhymes a little bit what you're saying, which is, what I heard you is up until general AI, there's certain things. So for me, my interpretation of that is just use it for the right purposes. Humans have tremendous value that maybe someday AI will also bring. It doesn't bring yet, but in my example, if people use that same AI to score resumes or something, to get the order at which people should pay attention to them for probability of outcome, but don't determine that outcome, now make the person more productive in terms of how they're doing their time, so they can assess with human judgment, okay, here's the rest of it. Then you get the productivity bump you're saying, you get rid of the rote activities that you said a lot of people don't want to do, and you wait to get more data to ultimately let folks like you build that GAI that gets us to the next step.
Yeah. If your goal is not to classify or rank, but to support a person's understanding of the data to better support their decision-making.
So that's the moment we're in right now.
Well, let me ask Scott to jump in and tell us what are the tools around the corner that will help us all be more creative?
Well, I think there's some technologies like generative adversarial networks that are, fairly new and really changing the world of creativity. Suddenly, you can create images of people who don't exist, or of animals that don't actually exist in the world but look real. And so, just the ability to be able to create these photorealistic images from a text description or some other very high-level inputs is potentially, groundbreaking for creativity. And so, that's going to change the way people interact with technology. But again, I think it gets to this notion of being able to amplify a human creator's abilities. So we're suddenly not doing all the production work to Photoshop these unreal but very real-looking images, but we're rather tasked with describing them and being really creative in doing that. So I think there's all kinds of advances that are really changing the way people work with technology. We have one example that I like to cite, which is related to a feature that we ship that allows you to remove objects from videos. And there was a team of documentary filmmakers who, on a very tight budget, who had shot all this footage, and they got back to edit it and realized that there were these specks of dust on the camera that completely destroyed all of their footage. And if they had had to go through and manually edit every frame, it would have blown their budget for sure, and it's frankly just a task that they couldn't do. But one AI-driven feature was able to take care of that problem for them at no cost, other than their Creative Cloud subscription.
Well, that's really awesome. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I wonder if the audience wants to join in. Do you have any questions? I have limitless questions for the panel, but I would like to invite you to send your questions through the app or to step up to the mic. Yes, go ahead.
All right, I'll read one of the questions from the slide of online Q&A. So how far away are machines from having an element of instinct? Is there a risk that the ability to make instinctive decisions will displace the human component?
Julie?
Let's see. So what does instinctive mean? So I think that's an interesting question in and of itself. And let's see. So I mean, you can think about it in terms of kind of like system 1 and system 2, thinking kind of like instinctual decision making versus more deliberative decision making. And there's in our human world, we require, and there's a place for both. And in the machine world, that ought to be true too. What distinguishes one machine learning technique from making like instinctual decisions versus another one making deliberative decisions? I think that's an interesting and deeper question that I don't have a clear-cut answer for you.
So the answer is far.
Well, I don't know. I'm thinking about it here, and maybe that's not true, but maybe another way of framing the question is like in a deliberative process. There's some objective and there's some goal that you're working towards and thinking through the steps towards. You have some ability to sort of interrogate the steps along the way in the process. And in an instinctive decision, it's kind of compacted in some way, and it's maybe harder to extract. And I think that there is, like, if you kind of frame it that way, there are different classes of machine learning techniques that kind of live maybe more in one than more in the other. And there is a place for both, too. So oftentimes in the world, we don't know what our objective or what our goal is. Like in Go, like there's a very clear, like game and sort of reward structure for an AI system to learn in. But in most of what we do, we don't have that, but we do well, and we bootstrap for with some heuristics and make progress.
Sounds like an excellent, sounds like an excellent PhD thesis topic. Let's go to the next question.
This is both for this panel and the global discussion that preceded. There are two old saws. One is 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, but sometimes it's the reverse. And another that rising tide lift all boats. And I wonder, first on the panel discussion now, how much of this issue of 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or the opposite, is going on. But the global question of the rising tide, if you look at the overarching situation, which is not the US, but the world, a lot is going on in Asia and also Africa. It's not just China. And there were graphs that showed productivity declining, but then it was said, I think in the discussion by Elizabeth, that this is not the case everywhere. So how much of the falling productivity, but more importantly, the effect on labor is as a result of the rest of the world rising? How much leakage is there, and how, with what you're doing, can we overcome our issues related to productivity? But there's still other things. I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you very much.
But I just want to, for just a second, if you looked at GNP, if you look at union participation, on the top end, on the bottom end, there are lots of things going on. And if you're not integrating all of this, I don't think you know what's really happening.
Anybody want to take a stab?
Well, yeah.
I was just going to say, for our customers who are already fairly high-skilled workers, it really is more about, I think the rising tide lifting all boats. That's not to say that there aren't cases where there are unintended consequences of technology, with the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think for these higher skilled workers, we're actually enabling them to use those higher skills more in their jobs.
So I would like to add to that briefly that I believe the whole world is aware of the $13 trillion of benefits that are due to come due to AI, and everyone is trying to get ready or get better empowered to take advantage of this. In fact, countries around the world who are not yet at the same level as the developed world with respect to infrastructure are stepping up to create a digitalized infrastructure that will enable this kind of process. The UN just launched a report on digitalization and the digitalization manifesto that is really embraced and taken seriously by countries around the world. Let's go to the next question. Could you introduce yourself and limit your comments to like 30 seconds so we can take more questions?
Very good. My name is Alan Alter, and I'm a fellow at the IDE. Quick question or short question. What are the biggest myths about retraining and reskilling workers?
That's to you, Fred.
Biggest myths. I can talk a lot about retraining, reskilling. I'm caught flat-foot thinking of a myth. This may be a little off of your topic. What comes to mind may not be exactly your answer, but I'll offer it. I think that we have a challenge that too often when people talk about reskilling and all this, they have some sense that we have to train coal miners to code, that people should be on computers and all this. This is extremely damaging to our opportunity. I think that we absolutely should be doing broad secondary or post-secondary education for people. But you know what? Not everybody should go to college. There are awesome professions that are worthy of respect, and by the way, making more money than a communications degree is going to get you out of Bowling Green, Ohio, if you, whether it's the trades and welding and electricians and plumbers. There's all sorts of micro certifications that can do it. If you take a cashier that has a proficiency to say, look, just learn Salesforce operations, there's about 50 companies that you can throw a rock from Kaiser Stadium and hit, and you're going to get a job for 50 grand a year with benefits. So I think too often, if I were to address that in one way I could productively, I think, sir, is that reskilling and retraining doesn't mean people are going to sit in front of computers and code. It means reskilling and retraining. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity with growth careers. They just might be in places that you haven't traditionally looked.
Thank you, Fred. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sarah. I work in online education, but my background is as a documentary filmmaker, so I know the Adobe suite very well. I'm commenting on both sort of things I've heard on this panel, is that the idea of AI driving creatives to just focus on the creative is wonderful, but so much of what you learn when you're in a creative field is through the actual mundane work.
Sure.
That is the apprenticeship. So my question is, as we scale out to just focus on the high-level creative, who are the equivalent of the workers on the side of the production line building the models, figuring out the process? If we kind of eliminate that in what you have to do to get to that creative level. What's your
Scott,
thoughts?
do you want to?
Yeah, I think there's probably still a lot of value in learning some of those skills, even if the AI is going to do a lot of that for you. But that's where I think, you know, the people in creative fields who are only doing that sort of mundane production work, the opportunity is to reskill them to do some of this higher level work. And in fact, what we found in our qualitative study was that that's what the work they actually want to do. And in fact, many of them that were stuck in some of that production work would be happy to move on to these sort of higher level skills. But it certainly means that we have to train them in those skills. And so how we educate creative professionals will have to change over time, I think, to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Scott. Next question.
Hi, my name is Jessica Leon, and I am an MIT MBA student. And my question is more around diversity and inclusion. As we can see from this panel, I don't really see a lot of people of color here. I would love to get your thoughts in terms of how are you capturing data to make sure to reduce those type of biases, specifically within people of color, and how are you retraining and making sure that these workforces are not left behind?
Sure.
Fred.
Yeah, that's, God, what a great question, what a great thing we should all be focused on. I'm a big fan and basically would plagiarize almost all the talking points of Byron Algis at Opportunity at Work, and he's a big proponent of competency and labor is equally distributed. Opportunity isn't right now. This is going to take a lot of proactive movement. The good news is, 2 years ago when we were at this conference, I think that it wasn't a strongly addressed topic of priors and data sets and what they were doing in terms of selection of applicants and things like that. I think we've got that one broadly solved in terms of being appreciative of it. Here's what's not solved. What's not solved is we still have way too high degree requirements for jobs, which block out a whole bunch of constituents from being considered, even though they have the skill set, but they might not have the liberal arts degree that goes with the skill set. And so I think there's got to be a real challenge to break down. And you're right, I see this too. I walk into rooms and look, I'm very conscious of the demographic I represent. Living in Boston, it is, if you put your mind to it, you can be fairly productive at getting diversity in your workforce on many different dimensions, gender and others. And when it comes to dimension of people of color in that, this is a huge thing we have to work on. I was thrilled to meet somebody at a dinner last night at Catalyte. He's trying to train people with a 5-month program and get them jobs. But we have to be proactively focused on this as companies. We have to be proactively focused on this as universities. And quite frankly, I think we have to drop degree requirements, because I think if we focus on skills and provide opportunity and assessments and things of this nature, we can make a lot faster movement than if we say we want to go back and train people in high school to be ready for a 4-year college experience, to come out of that college experience with the financing and debt. Oh, forget it. There's great people out there. Let's get them with skills and assessments, not degrees.
Thank you, Fred. We are almost out of time. We're going to take one more quick question right here.
Mike, excuse me, Mike Galeazzo with the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland. What do you think of the idea in the future of looking at, because learning is so important, that we redefine that as a job and we pay people to learn?
Sounds good to me.
I mean, I think that's great. If it can increase inclusion in learning that can have measurable outcomes, that's something to consider. Personally, I'm a little afraid of where we're financing everything, but as a concept, financing that versus something else would make a lot of sense to me.
This is actually an important part of the conversation today. How do we reskill? What kind of skills we need to give people? And actually, who's going to organize the programs and who's going to pay? Is it the universities? Is it the governments? Is it the businesses who benefit? This, we posed this as a question a year ago at the conference, and the question remains very open and very interesting to discuss. I hope you all get together during the break to start making progress. We're almost almost out of time. I would just like to end by bringing the panel back to technology, which is where we started from. And so very quick answers from each of you. Imagine I were a genie and I was able to grant you any wish you wanted about the use of technology. What would you ask me?
I would ask for data, because data is at the heart of machine learning, and having data sets that are unbiased, which are very hard to develop. That's the lifeblood.
Granted. Julie.
So, I mean, similar spirit. I wouldn't exactly ask for data, but the fundamental reason behind the ask is the same. What we really need is a way to deeply embed the understanding of the people that need to be empowered by these tools with the researchers that are developing the tools, so that we can develop, so that they can be used in that way. And so resources around like translational programs, integrated into our education, our research translational fellows within companies to facilitate things like startups.
Granted.
Awesome.
Fred.
Well, I was going to say data, particularly it's very difficult to get the proper human capital data you need to have the outcomes you want. But since my good friend Scott got data from the genie, and I'm sure he'll share it with me because we're fellow Tartans from Carnegie Mellon, then therefore I guess I would want accurate 100% predictions of where the S&P will close for the next 30 days. How about that?
Well, thank you all for being so engaged, and thank you to our brilliant panelists.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.